Hello and welcome to another screencast, this time on the consequences of a sedentary lifestyle. So again, just in regards to the presentation, the yellow text boxes are for tasks for students, the green text boxes are the note-taking sections for the students, the blue text boxes are differentiation tasks, and the red text boxes are the teaching and learning strategies specifically for the teachers. So what does this syllabus basically entail? In essence, you need to know what we mean by a sedentary lifestyle. So what does that key term actually mean? So to be able to define it, and then you need to recognize what the consequences are of this type of lifestyle. So you can see there a picture on the right hand side of a sedentary lifestyle, so where we're sat for long periods of time, whether it be on the sofa, on our bed and so on, without doing any sort of physical activity, and also just the negative choices in life if we're eating poorly, if we're just constantly playing sort of video games, and if we're eating and drinking unhealthily, all of those can have an impact in regards to this lifestyle. So first things first, just get this down in terms of what are the barriers of participating in sport. So what are the reasons why some people say they can't play sport or they don't want to play sport? So what things prevent us from exercising or participating? So pause the video here and see if you can come up with some reasons. Okay, so hopefully you come up with some different reasons as to why people, whether it be young people or adults, specifically say they can't exercise or they can't participate in sport. So ultimately, the most common one, I suppose, for adults in particular, is this idea of daily workload. So we don't have enough time because we're too busy with our lives in terms of having to do, whether it be domestic chores or our actual life, our work that we have involved in our daily lives. Ultimately, we might have a negative experience. So whether we've been at primary school or secondary school and we've been participating in PE, or in sport in general, we may have had some negative experiences. Therefore, those people that have those negative experiences don't want to reenact those experiences, and ultimately they don't want to have those negative experiences again. Time element, that is a massive one, similar to sort of the daily workload. So ultimately people will suggest they don't have enough hours in the day to exercise, whether it be exercise itself or the whole what they will describe as the palaver of having to get changed, and then back changed again and showered after, perhaps once we do some exercise. We might have a lack of confidence, and that links into that negative experiences example, whereby we don't feel confident that we can complete the task or complete the exercise, and ultimately we don't want to therefore participate in it. And we might also lack in self-motivation, so we don't have that internal, that intrinsic motivation, that internal drive within us that's telling us to get up and exercise and do some things. Within this country especially, unlike sort of, I would say Australia kind of has a society whereby they are outdoors a lot of the time, aren't they? Because ultimately their climate and their weather is quite favourable, whereas in the Northern Hemisphere where we are, in terms of the UK, a little bit more difficult, isn't it? Because ultimately we may get overcast days, we may get days of rain and so on, and that makes at times us being able to exercise and participate in sport more difficult, and ultimately people will use it as an excuse to say that they're not going to participate. There might be a lack of access to facilities. That is obviously a common one as well. Ultimately, if we don't have access to green space, or an AstroTurf pitch, for example, it costs too much money. We don't have access to different equipment needed for that specific sport, then ultimately these can be barriers to exercise. Okay, so government guidelines. For you, in terms of this section, you need to be aware that young people and children, so anyone under sort of the age of 16 to 18 really, should be, they're guided by the government to complete at least 60 minutes of what we call moderate to vigorous exercise per day. And ultimately that will include things like running, dancing, as it says there, cycling, swimming, or some active games. So what do we mean by moderate intensity and vigorous intensity activity? So ultimately moderate intensity is whereby our breathing becomes a little bit harder, we're starting to increase our body temperature, so we feel warmer, and our heartbeat obviously starts to increase fairly rapidly, but we're still able to hold a conversation. So that's what we mean by sort of moderate activity. Whereas vigorous activity is whereby we're breathing a lot harder and we're feeling very warm at this stage, very hot, and ultimately that heart rate will increase quite significantly, and we find it therefore quite difficult at that stage to then hold a conversation with someone. For adults, this is just important, I guess, for later life, really. We're looking at three to 5 times of, well, as it says there, 5 times, in fact, of 30 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity per week. So 150 minutes in total per week. So that could include things like brisk walking, cycling, swimming, could involve some, domestic house chores in terms of, for example, gardening. And on the right hand side, you've got the diagram here, and I think the top part of it especially is quite important for you to look at as students in terms of why are we doing this physical activity? Why is this the government guidelines? Because ultimately, when we exercise, we are strengthening our bones, we're strengthening our muscles, and as young people, as we're growing, developing, and our bodies are still growing and developing, ultimately that's going to help us, isn't it, to get that strength within our specific joints. It's going to improve our ligaments. It's going to improve our suppleness in terms of flexibility and other fitness components as well. But it will also improve our confidence. If we're looking at social benefits, we're looking at mental benefits. It helps with our concentration, it helps with our learning, and ultimately it helps us maintain that healthy sort of balance and healthy weight. And finally, the aspect of serotonin, isn't it? So the release of the hormone, the endorphin, which releases within our brain to make us feel good and better about ourselves. And that ultimately is also going to help with our quality of sleep. Okay, so consequences of a sedentary lifestyle. So I think the key thing to get down here first and foremost is what we mean by sedentary lifestyle. So in essence, we're talking about a lifestyle with irregular or no physical activity. I want you to pause the video at this point, and you've got a question there on the top right. So what are some of the impacts if we do not exercise? So I just want you to just have a list and write down some of those impacts. Okay, so hopefully you've got some ideas. You've maybe looked at the diagram on the right hand side to help you a little bit, and you come up with a few of your own ideas as well. But ultimately, we're looking at the fact that if we don't exercise, we're likely to get an increase in weight gain because obviously we're not burning off those calories. We're more likely to increase our risk of heart disease. We may also get hypertension, and this is the idea where we reduce the suppleness, the flexibility of our arteries, and ultimately this can link to a higher blood pressure, which has a negative impact on our health. If we get increase in weight gain, then ultimately we might get type 2 diabetes. We're also going to impact in terms of our sleep quality, our overall motivation, our confidence, our self-esteem, and we just generally, if we think of fitness components, we're just generally going to be more lethargic, more fatigued. We're going to be more tired because we haven't done any form of exercise. Okay, so finally, sort of for the teachers in regards to this topic, it's a fairly short topic. So things that I would get the students to do is once you've gone through the different details, you've gone through some exam questions and whatnot, get the students to actually create a poster of some sort of explaining and outlining the risks of a sedentary lifestyle, so it can raise the awareness for them and their peers. And you could come up with like a public speech, couldn't you? So again, you could get the students to be like the public health minister again, and you could think about sort of producing a 1-minute speech as to why studying PE, why being physically active is so important to us. Best of luck with this task and this topic.